Welcome to the Visual Storytelling Podcast. My name is Fred Ranger, and I'm so happy that you're joining us today for another inspirational conversation. Today I have a very special guest. I'm very impressed by his work, and we've been talking about discussing on this podcast for a little while now, and I'm so happy that he's joining us today. So, Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
So, Greg, I'm so happy because we've been in similar podcasts over the years, and we've even done one about Leica and so on with Ricky. But now it's one-on-one, and I can ask all the questions and find out a little bit more about you. But before we go into the nitty-gritty, can you walk our audience through a bit more on how you became a photographer in the first place?
Yeah, my name is Greg Hatton, Hatton. And I am a visual storyteller. Like, I use images basically to tell stories. And that might sound cliche, but I was a filmmaker. I'm still a filmmaker. And I'm also a photographer. I also write. So I've been published in a few magazines with my photography and my writing. And I think, to answer your question more directly, what got me into this whole thing was the storytelling that's associated to the images that we see. It's not just like looking at something blindly and just like, oh, I like that. It's communicating to you somehow, some way. And I fell into the magic and the minutia of how you can like shape something into a means of communication across language, and more on a human level. Like, I really enjoy seeing how people take in the world around them. And with cameras, cameras are designed to do that, just show us the world that's around us, show us ourselves, show us everything that we might encounter. And that's what I love to do.
Man, this is a perfect intro because, as you all know, the name of the show is Visual Storytelling Podcast, and there is a reason why, and I completely agree with Greg on that one, that photography and storytelling go so well together because it's a very powerful medium, right? So, and you did mention that you're a filmmaker too. Do
Yeah.
you find more similarities or differences between both type of medium, if I can say?
It's perspective, right? Like, there are similarities, there are differences, but to the end user, the similarities, I think they kind of outweigh everything else. You're still communicating something to somebody who hasn't seen what you have, or expressing a dream or an idea to somebody that didn't have it before you. So that similarity is like the baseline, and then technically speaking, how you capture it and what you're using and all that kind of stuff does come into play. And there's differences there, of course. But again, the end goal of what we see, because we as humans are visual learners. Um, we learn through a lot of different means, but we really learn by what we see. That is, the underlying fact is that stays the same across motion picture and still.
Yeah, this is it's a nice way to put it. I do agree that a lot of similarities. At the same time, I don't know if you're like me, but I think that photography might be even more powerful because it's one frame, fraction of a second, and this moment will never come back in time. I think filmmaking is a great medium, but I find it a bit easier to tell a story because it's moving. It's literally what you see every day in front of you, humans, interactions, and so on and so forth. Whereas the photography side of things is like you have to decide what is that moment and how people can interpret the story. And to your point, there's not one way to look at a photo. People might create their own story when they look at an image. So that's very, very powerful. Greg, so this is also something I want to ask you. So your style, because you've been developing a very unique style, your use of movement for that matter, and black and white too. You've got some pretty awesome work there. So how would you say you over the years develop what you call the Renaissance man style?
Honestly, I think it really just boils down to like authenticity, right? I grew up in a situation where I didn't know too much about photography or the masters that came before me. I was doing a lot of what I was just because that's what I figured out. I definitely opened up the possibility for growth. I mean, if you want to look at anything that's happening on in any profession, like how do I say it? Your handwriting is definitely going to be different from the person right next to you just because of how you see it or how you feel, how your body moves, and how you interpret the words and the movement. It's the same with photography, and that's what really separates each artist or each individual from one another. uh, you know, I kind of celebrate that. I like the fact that, I mean, I'm really stoked that you say that it's unique and all that kind of thing, because I try to challenge a lot of creatives, cinematographers, photographers. And, when I'm looking at Instagram or their, socials, I'm like, let's try not to look like each other. You know, back in the day, there was a lot of people that did things. And, if you take a camera and you expose it the same way, perfect example. If you take a film camera, you and I, we have the same settings, same angle, same, lens choice, same camera, just two shots in the same place. But you take a negative and I take a negative to the dark room, and we process it and we make a wet print out of it with our own dodging and burning. Those two exact technical duplicates are going to look completely different just because of our sensibilities. And, when we're talking about photography or art in general in this day and age, like having that personal stamp or just understanding what you're seeing, I think that's important. Going forward into this day and age with, AI and all this kind of thing, it's like that personal touch is going to be worth so much. So honing in as to what you see, but not, you know, it's important, but I think that the consistency and why you're doing that is what's going to remain um, tangible to people, and that's what's important.
Yeah, yeah, you touch a good point on a photography world that changed so much over the past months and years, I would say, because the definition of a storyteller, a photographer is evolving. To your point,
Oh yeah,
in the
oh
world of
yeah,
AI, and I know we both happen to love a company called Leica for
yeah.
for our tools to tell our stories, and they've moved forward with a chip in their cameras to actually make sure in the M11P, I think, that this image was taken by a real human trying to tell a real story.
Right.
I want to hear you out on that because you seem to be very very inclined to human in the loop type of photography. Other photographers use AI for very thoughtful and important stuff like product photography and so on. But what is
Mhm.
your view on the actual movement that we're seeing right now in the space?
I think it's the movement is like, across the board, just trying to find authenticity, because a lot of the populace right now is hungry for what's real. We've seen fake things pop up all over the place. We've seen like misinformation. We've seen all of these YouTube ads with or YouTube videos with AI generated voices, and you don't even know who you're listening to. You're looking at IG posts that are fake or that don't even really show what's really happening. And it doesn't have to be anything like political or anything like that. It could be somebody that's just posting as if they're like the richest person in the world doing all these crazy trips, but at home they're just sitting in front of a green screen. You know, that kind of drama is popping up. And I don't know if people are really putting a finger on it, but with a lot of this generated stuff, like we know it's fake. It's like when somebody's lying to you, when they're talking to you, and we can feel it. When AI generated art first came out, it was like cool for like a week, and then after that it was like, oh, this is boring.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Has like no soul. Why am I looking at it? It's just like, I don't even know what we're doing. Same with to me, AI generated photography. um I'm sorry, you guys didn't see that, but I put that in air quotes because it's not photography. Like, I'll go to my grave and point out a very clear fact. Like, AI generated images, using photography parameters to make an image that looks like a photograph is not photography.
yeah,
Photography is an act. It's a verb. It's the act of like making photographs, like
Mm,
images that like exist in your hand that you can hold up and flip around and show it to a person. Those are photographs. So if you're not making photographs, are you really a photographer,
that's a
or are you just an image maker?
That's a good question, and I think we found the title of this episode, Greg.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I think you're totally right, and this is where, at the end of the day, I don't know if you agree, but I believe in assistive AI more than in generative AI in terms of photography and for photographers. At the end of the day, if there's ways to speed up a workflow for those who want to do that, I mean, you mentioned the dark room. Some people like you and
hmm
others like to go to the dark room and to feel the process and put the photos in and so on and so forth. And some other people want to get the job done faster, but still be keep a human in the loop and be the creator of the
yeah,
photograph. To your point, so I think we're at a very interesting moment in time where being a photographer, if that's your main job, you have to understand the technology because, like it or not, it's here, it's there, and there's ways to use assistive tools in your workflow to get to where you want to go. So,
yeah. I mean, totally. It's first, I mean, I just want to be very clear. Like, I'm not against the march forward in technology. I'm not against AI and all that kind of thing. I think it has its place, and I agree. Assisted AI is beneficial and should be utilized. We've been doing that for years already. Actually,
yeah.
it's just it's like cloaked in different names. You know what I mean? Like Lightroom and the toolbar that's on there. That's a lot of AI working for us. It's not thinking for us, but it's doing the math for us to change your tones, to change your levels. Like that's a different level of it. And and I try to pose this to people because we it's a matter of perspective, right? Like we are photographers, we're filmmakers, we're image makers, and we understand what the tool does to convey information. And the very interesting thing is the concept of perspective is that we know that if you look at something in a different way, it gives the whole scene a different purpose or power, or presents a weakness, or an empathy. We know what perspective does. So we have to really think about perspective in every parallel in life. So take AI for example, and I've been saying this in a few of the workshops that I've been involved in. You know, a lot of times we talk about AI and it sounds like, the Terminator. Like it's going to come, it's going to take over, it's going to do this, it's all bad, blah, blah, blah. There has never been a serious discussion in our real world about AI like R2D2 or C3PO.
Yeah.
Like since the 70s, we've seen Star Wars and AI has been hanging around and they were our best friends. But now all of a sudden it's the worst thing in the world. And that's all we can imagine. And I don't think that that's true. And maybe it's not all that we can imagine, but that's all we talk about. And again, this is perspective. If we talk about things in a more clear way with a better understanding, then we can participate so much easier and in a more welcome fashion and create, a better place to live, to be, to share, you know?
Yeah, that's so true. And speaking of which, like again, let's put the AI debate or conversation aside. Let's go
Yeah.
back to human. Taking very appealing and telling stories. But
hmm
what makes you click? Like, what makes you say, you know what, this is a frame that I want to capture? Because again, I look at your work and it's very powerful. It's like those seems like moments that are worth sharing. But what makes you go like, wow, this is something I want to? Outside of the paid work that you do, like what when you do photography for yourself, what makes you click?
Yeah. The world's amazing to me. People are amazing to me. Um, my personal heritage is fascinating, being an African American man, or, um, being from Los Angeles, learning about all of the differences and diversities in this on this planet has been fascinating. I mean, I don't care where you come from. If you saw, an orca for the first time in the water, you'd be amazed. There's a reason that no matter where you are on this planet, if you see a beautiful sunset, you'll probably stop and look at it. Um, all these human things that we encounter every single day are, they're glimpses of the magic of what life is. And I do get romantic about these things because I think we don't talk about it enough. I mean, we're doing some amazing things with the world right now. We're doing amazing things with each other right now. History says we've done some pretty bad things. There's some pretty bad things happening right now, but you know, we can also celebrate what's good, what's amazing, and the people that we come across, no matter where they're from or what their religion is. You know, I think I have friends from every religion. I have friends from different countries, different backgrounds, different races, and we've shared amazing times in capturing. What moves me to photography on my own is when I'm traveling through the world. There's examples of that everywhere, every single day. This conversation that we're having right now from London to Montreal. You know, our skin doesn't look the same. Our backgrounds aren't the same. We have a common language in photography and art, really, and just experiencing life, and that's worth taking the picture and sharing it with people that feel the same way. And that's kind of my mission.
Yeah, well, that's you're doing a very good job at it, and thank you for all the sharing that you do, because you are a pretty active photographer, sharing your work, whether it's through like a gallery or online. Talk to us a bit more about sharing your work, because that's something that some of the photographers out there are pretty shy. Like they're most of them will say, my work's not worthy of being seen, and so on and so forth. We all have the imposter syndrome. I know I can speak for myself on that one. So how do you overcome that as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I was right there with you. Like, I didn't think that my work was good enough because a lot of times I didn't think my work looked like anybody else's that was out there. And usually, what's out there is like, oh, this is what's important. This, you have to be doing this with the flash, or you have to be in people's face, or you have to be like this type of thing. And for years, I didn't really associate myself with like, oh, I'm a photographer. It was just more like I was just, I take pictures too. I like pictures, or I'm a photographer to my family, but not to the world, that type of thing. But I think in 2020, while we were all locked down and all that, I spent a ton of time reading my photography books and looking at the work of, Alex Webb, looking at the work of Sebastião Salgado, my own mentor, Frank Jackson, John Simmons, Avedon. I can go down the list. Brody Carava, Gordon Parks. It goes on and on and on. But I started to realize that the work that they did, that I was looking at in print, were pieces that they were producing as they were my age. And I was like, oh wow, this is like when they were me, time wise. They were running around creating this work, and this was what was driving them. And it kind of, the one thing that the lockdown really did was help a lot of us focus in on, kind of who we are and what we're doing. And I really saw myself for what I am, as a storyteller, as a conveyor of knowledge, as a friend, as a participant in pretty much everything that I put my hands on. And the passion for photography was something that um, really stood out. It always has stood out, but in that moment, I really like grasped the fact that I was doing the same thing that these guys were doing, these men and women were doing at, at that time in their lives. It just has a lot more attached to it with the modern day, responsibilities and hustle and bustle of the rat race and all that. It just might look a little bit different. So I decided to just sit into it and actually go the extra mile and put the work out, showcase it, talk about it, learn from other photographers. Because I was pretty comfortable as a filmmaker. And it's something that I love. But when I started to speak to different artists and photography and travel with the work, and I've been to Spain, I've been to I'm sorry, Germany, London, Morocco, France, and all throughout the U.S. with my work and talking about it, and really seeing that there is a place that I can create what I'm really thinking and what I really want to share. And I started to really sink into that. And I think everybody can do it. I mean, everybody that's interested to the realist level can do it, and it's not the easiest thing, but it's probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. Yeah,
Is
it's
there
just to
is
put
there
yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely, and a very inspiring story. And is there one moment that you said, "Man, I think I can do this thing. Like, I think this is working out." Like, is there one aspect
Yeah,
of the work
so
that you know?
it's interesting that you put it like that because it was not a situation where I said, "Yeah, I think I can do this." It was a situation where I was like, "Wait, I'm doing this."
Okay,
Yeah, it's like I'm already doing it. Like the I don't really know how to put this into words, and people have heard me say this before, but like something just clicked, and it's like, yeah, that's what you're doing right now.
that's
You
good.
know,
It's
you
a
need
great
to, you
feeling, I
need,
guess, when you find out. Oh man, okay,
yeah,
I'm already doing it. Nice.
yeah, you're already doing it, and it's almost like you have to take ownership in it. In these workshops that I've been a part of, I've been really stressing the responsibility of the photographer.
Yeah,
You know, it doesn't matter if you are using a Leica or if you're using a Hasselblad or if you're using your iPhone. Like if you're about the craft and you understand the craft, it's about what you're creating and who you are in creating it. The rest of that, you basically will pick the tool that fits you best. For me, it's Leica. I've always wanted to shoot Leica, and I've gotten to the point where I can. And when I say gotten to the point, there's a barrier of entry because these things are not cheap at all, um, and they're not easy either. I started shooting like a film rangefinders, and that's burning money, like trying to figure out how to make a rangefinder work and to
yep,
be efficient with it. Um, but it's so worth it. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. It's cliche, right? But that's the feel of shooting a Leica is especially a Leica rangefinder is very special, and that's very real. And I think that's just a testament to you knowing what you did to be able to make something work in such a manual level.
yeah,
And I think that that's what that comes from. But yeah, it's just that realization, like, this is what you're doing. Take some pride in it, take some responsibility in it, in the work that you're putting out and how it's touching people and why it's touching people. And you know I might be romanticizing all this. I know a lot of other photographers and a lot of them don't even get this granular in it, but my type of work, my type of art, um, has that depth. That's what makes me do what I do. So that's my angle on it, and that's okay.
yeah. I can relate so much to a lot of what you said, including the Leica part, and we'll get to that in a minute. Although
Mhm.
I did mention pre-show to Greg, like, this is not a gear show, but I know people want to hear a little bit more about the tools that the photographers around the world are using to tell their stories. But to go back to your point, I mean, man, this is so true. What you're saying, this at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is develop something that you'll be proud of, and putting your work out there will eventually, if you put in the work, connect with people. And what a nice feeling to find out about it, that when you're doing it, like I can't wrap my head around that this is a nice, smooth, natural way of doing it. I mean, you were already in the art space with your filmmaking, but the transition to being a photographer, I know you're still a filmmaker, but focusing on photography. I like your story. I like your angle, because this is not something we see often. Usually, people say, "Oh, there was this call from a client, and then I was a photographer, or I put out some work and I made a sale, and I'm like, oh my god, okay, this is something that I can do for a living." But I like your story, because this is something that will give a lot of hope to a lot of people, because young photographer these days, they don't necessarily know how to do it. If you only watch YouTube and go on Instagram, I will tell you this: this is not the ideal. I mean, some people make a ton of money. If making money is your thing, go crazy. But if developing an art craft and something that you'll invest time and grow within, I prefer Greg's angle to the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's a pursuit of the purity behind it. I believe that if you do something well enough, money will follow.
Mm,
Um, but you really got to be doing it for you. I mean, again, we're back in this time, the conversation of, you know, everything's going to be pretty easy nowadays. AI is just going to make everything easy. I mean, again, our iPhones and Google phones or whatever phone can take incredible pictures without even trying. Um, and that's made a lot of people think that they're photographers or that they don't need a camera or whatever, but that's without understanding the craft. And the craft does so much more. I think what did somebody say? They were talking about how if you think that you're an artist by using AI generated art or whatever, so that's basically like using a microwave to cook something and saying you're a Michelin star chef.
I like that.
you know
I like that a lot.
it's the same conversation,
Yeah, yeah,
but I mean, you can do it and it might work, but going into the craft and understanding like the history that came before it and understanding that you can participate to the story that goes beyond you. And there's people that are looking up to us right now. There's people that are fans of Fred Ranger. There's people that are fans of Greg Hatton, that we don't even know. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like there's people that see our work that are moved by it. I Prime example. Um, if I had to choose a favorite photographer, I don't like playing favorites, but if I had to choose, I'd say it would be Sebastião Salgado.
mm,
The interesting thing there, I knew about his work. I liked his images way before I even knew his name. Didn't know what he looked like. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't even know how to look for photographers like that because it just wasn't in my vocabulary growing up. But his work hit me so hard. And I was like, this is the dope stuff right here. So there's people that are listening to this podcast who may have never seen our faces or just discovered our work or whatever. And, we have an influence on them. And that's, it goes granularly. It goes deeper than that. That person that's looking to us has people looking to them.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So that's how the progression of time works. That's how we share information and thoughts. And that's why I really talk about the responsibility in everything that we do. And I just happen to use photography for that conversation because that's, the craft that I love so much, in storytelling, filmmaking. Um, if it feels like it's done for lackluster reasons, in my opinion, you can have it. I don't really care. But I'm really into the stuff that has like either extremely authentic style, purpose, meaning, and a voice. Yeah.
yeah. Purpose and voice, man. I think this is very powerful stuff right there. The microwave conversation. Do you think there's like people who are dissing other people like, but I use auto reheat and you input your minutes yourself? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that can go back to photography
Well, there you
too.
go.
It's like, well, yeah, I just did this and the other. And, you know,
Yeah,
it's not, a conversation like, again, when somebody's lying to you,
yeah,
right? But you also know when somebody's being very genuine about who they are and what they're doing in their work and all that. It doesn't even really have to be said. We're telling stories right now just in who we are and how we're interacting. I'm learning more about you than I ever knew. You know more about me than you ever knew, not just in the words, but how we're communicating. So, you know, you can do what you want to do, but when you talk about it, that'll reveal your intent. And the intent is something that's intangible, and it'll come across in your work. It'll come across in everything that you do because it will always be there.
yeah, absolutely. And this is where, going back to the previous comment about being careful of what you see online, connect with real people, talk to them, see into their eyes, what they're about, look at their soul. This is
Yeah,
something you talked about, connecting with the work of Elgato. I mean, at the end of the day, this is something that when you start to know the person, you're getting even deeper into the spirit and the soul of that person. This is art, versus, to your point, generating content.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know if you saw recently, but Daniel Ek, for the CEO of Spotify, referred to making music as close to $0 cost content, and the
yeah.
musicians were
No,
furious. Again, this is the a perception game, to your point. So I think I feel the same about photography. It's a great analogy. But Greg, you did open the door a couple minutes ago about the tools you use to tell your stories in this very day and age, and you're
mm,
not necessarily using the most advanced AI eye tracking type of cameras. You happen to be using Leica, and we're both Leica shooters. This is not to brag about the brand; it's just to say that it's an experience shooting with these cameras. So, what do you shoot on, and why do you decide to go with these cameras?
Um, so I shoot. Um, okay, my favorite camera of all time is the Leica M6. I love that camera. My personal history with it, and because it's the one that kind of really got me honed in on rangefinder shooting. Um, the intimacy of shooting with that camera, because I mean, there's no viewfinder. There's a rangefinder. You're going to look through the window, but you're not going to see a live video or a live image of what it is you're shooting. You're shooting a rangefinder, so you have to think about the image before you pull the trigger. The whole experience of shooting film, where you have to figure out what you want to do with its exposure, and you won't know if you got it right until you got the film back. Like, that whole process is awesome. And when you start dialing it down and really doing the math and getting this thing worked out so that you're actually like catching amazing shots, and you realize how hard it is to have done that. Like, I've gotten action shots with the M6, and I'm just like, wow, okay,
And it's
so
it's not
maybe we've
blurry, and it's not
graduated.
blurry, Greg.
No, not blurry. I mean, I can show you some images.
Nice, nice.
This one, boy, it's arguably one of my favorite shots. It's my most memorable shot because I actually thought about it completely, set the thing up. The boy ran and jumped, and I, clicked the shutter, and I was like, man, I feel like that was cool. We'll see what happens. And when I got the negative back, it was perfect. And I was like,
Nice.
wow. Like, so all of that, the whole equation added up properly. That feeling has not been replaced by anything digital.
Hmm.
So that camera, the film rangefinders are incredible. So, okay, back to it. So the M6 is my favorite. I do have an M3 that was my first Leica. And now it just sits as a trophy, and I just like look at it. I
Are,
should shoot it
are you
again,
are you
but
able to do the light measurement in your head now that you've been shooting for so many years? Or
kind of in certain situations, yeah. Like, I know when I'm like, I usually shoot either 100 speed, 400 speed, or 3200 speed film, and I rarely do 3200. I mainly shoot 400.
mm-hmm.
I don't like to shoot in the middle of the day with top light. That's the really, really direct hot and all that in California. That's not my favorite space to be. But in the mornings and in the evenings, 400 is on point, and I can run around with, I can change my shutter speeds and get it to where I need to be. Um, Digitally, I have an M11 and I have an SL2, making room for an SL3 because that camera is amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
SL3 is dope. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much what I'm working with right now, and it handles everything that I need to do. The video stuff that I do on my SL2 and that I have done on the SL3 are, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
pretty good.
That's the thing, right? So when you start shooting Leica, and then they get you at hello, because this is so different in terms of experience. But they do have cameras that are up to the today's specs. And you're talking about the SL3. I did made a little review when they launched at the Leica store here in Montreal, and
Mhm.
man, they were able to bring this thing a little bit less heavy and smaller. This is great, and also all the the specs that comes with it. Yet
Yeah.
it does feel like a Leica just in the build, and so on and so forth. I like your story about the M6 because I have an M6 too, and this is
Hey.
my M6. This is a silver one. Do you
Mhm.
have the black one, the silver one, or?
No, I have the silver one too.
Oh, there you go.
Mhm.
So that was also my first Leica camera, and to your point, even though the first roll I shot was completely all black photos because I didn't know what I was doing. Secondly, I shot a phantom roll in Italy. Can you imagine? Like, I woke up super early, wanted to have that light that you're talking about, and then shot the entire thing, and it was a phantom roll. So, and all of that happened to me, and I still love this camera to death.
Yeah.
And I've put since then, hundreds and hundreds of rolls. But at the end of the day, this camera, this is the one camera that I don't know for you, but I will never sell it. Like, this is something that's with me in my grave, or I'm gonna pass on to
Yeah,
a member of my family, because that's, you know, where it started for me. Like where I felt that I really was now more investing time in the craft, to your point, than
yeah.
the technical aspect of photography. And no offense to any other brands, I used all of them, Fuji, Sony, all these guys, and they're great cameras, especially Fuji, to be honest. And there's a similar path, I think, for all of us, getting into the Fuji game and then moving to the Leica brand. And at the end of the day, to your point, it's about the experience and how they've been able to be consistent across the line from M6 to M10 or M9, M10, M11, M11P is pretty impressive. The
Oh,
dials
it's
are at the same place, the feel is the same. It's not the same result, of course, because it's digital against film. But man, I take one, I take the other. I have my M10R here. Like, this is the same freaking experience. This is so great, and the
yeah.
lenses. It's all about the lenses, right?
The lenses are insane. I went to Wetzlar and I saw them making the cameras, and talking about how they were able to progress the technology but stay so true to the essence. You know, the M10, I think that was the first camera that was like the same dimensions as the
Yep,
M6,
yep,
and the fact that all of that technology is in that shape, and those lenses are so small. You have a 51.4 that's like that big. It's
yeah,
like crazy. Um, yeah, and to know that these things are still being assembled by hand, and that's there's a lot that goes into that, and that's a lot of the reason why I kind of went after Leica, is because I'm about authenticity and purpose and all that. Like I love to be a part of things that are real, and I'm not saying that Fuji or Canon or Sony are not real. Like that's not the point. What I'm saying is, with the history of what photography has done, like has been pretty true to the history of and the purpose of photography. Um, they're not making copying machines like Canon or anything like that. It's not a again, I'm not knocking Canon. I'm not knocking any other brand because I think you can get down with anything. I mean, I started out with Nikon. I love Nikons.
yeah,
Um, but I was about photography. I wasn't really about the brand. Um, Now the experience that I have with my friends, fellow Leica photographers, and some of my friends that are not Leica photographers, but in our little group of, when I go to these events and I see people from around the world, we're still like kids running around, even the ones that are older than my generation. Um, it's so awesome that we're talking about, we don't really even talk about what cameras we have. We're talking about what we're shooting, or we're just shooting in general. We were at the grand opening at the Leica store in New York in Meatpacking District. Rob Terrell is my buddy. He's the manager at that store, and that opening was a celebration of just like it. I think it did a little bit more than we thought it was going to do, just because I saw like Jason Roman was there,
yeah,
Rough Draft was there. Holy crap, Gajan was there, dude. It
yeah.
was like it was crazy to see so many people. Ralph Gibson came. We had Terry LaRue was in the building, Matthew Baton, like all these people that we know each other, but we're always like working on all this kind of thing. But we were all there with no real agenda. So we started like walking around New York just shooting and having
Nice.
like probably like the most star-studded photo walk that you could ever imagine, dude. It
It's
was like it
the All
was
Star
super.
Band, the All Star Band.
Yeah, it was like an all-star game, dude. And I was very like happy to be a part of that and experience that city and I love New York, but to be out there and just like again, we weren't even talking about like what we were shooting. We were just like blasting off. Like so many pictures came out of that experience and it felt really good. And we started thinking like, man, we need to do this more often. You know what I mean? Like this is why we're doing it.
Yeah,
The money and all that kind of stuff with jobs and chasing jobs and trying to earn a living, that's one thing. But this, like, we're all, you and I, Fred, and anybody that's listening, like, we like to go out and shoot. We like to share ideas. We like to see each other's pictures. So get out, get your friends out, go to galleries, go to enter competitions. Just because, I've been in so many competitions now and I've seen work and I'm like, yo, if this work is beating me,
Totally
then
fine.
I don't know what's going on. But it's not even like that competition for it. It's more of a fact that like when you see what people are doing and they're having success,
Hmm.
it's really proof that you're already doing it.
Yeah.
You can do this. Your work is exactly the same picture as that one that's on the wall. You can do it. You just have to believe in yourself, to put yourself out there. And when you do, you make these friends and you make these star-studded walks and you make these adventures that are separate from mine, but super special to you. So, that's what this is all about, that sharing experience. And, we get to just do it and share it through images as photographers.
The power of community, man. Something so powerful, for lack of a better expression. But when you live it, I mean, just like the experience you shared with us right now, you come back home and you're like, man, that's the purpose. It's not about the gear. It's not even about the photos. At the end of the day, I don't know if you guys took good photos. I'm sure you did. But you're coming back home on the plane back to LA, and you're like, this was a moment I'll remember for the rest of my life. Like this.
Forever. I
Yeah.
mean, the images were out of control, and like my mentor, Frank Jackson would always say, like, with photography, it's really like you're capturing like immortality type thing.
Mm.
Like that's how immortality exists. Is like we actually get to capture it, and those images that were created are monumental. They take you right back to that time, and going further back, that's one of the things that kind of got me hooked on photography as a child, was like seeing pictures and photo albums and just like wanting to learn about these times and in these ages that I saw myself as a young person and my family as younger people, and in different places. Like all that kind of stuff is kind of what got me going to a deeper level.
Nice. Is there one photo that actually represents your work more than other? I know you shoot a lot of different things. Um, I'll give you kind of a direction there, because I see that there's street photography, there's portraits, there are lifestyle type of images. So before answering the one photo question, which is impossible, I know it's an impossible
Mhm.
question, but is there a genre of photography that gets you out of bed excited, or they're all like, again, you're about telling stories and you don't care the genre?
Nah, I mean, to be honest, it's all of it. I have a gallery exhibition that's hanging in Los Angeles right now, at the Los Angeles Leica store. It's up until July 15th. So if you're in the area, stop by. But and we're doing a panel discussion on the 23rd, so we'll talk about it a little bit deeper then. But the answer to your question is, like, I'm inspired again by life,
Hmm.
and that gallery exhibition is called Things You See. And I don't really play favorites when it's talking about images or talking about pretty much anything, because they all have a lot of different purposes. It's just more about the participation that you put into it. And for me, when it comes to photography, there are different genres of, there's portraiture, there's street photography, there's still life, there's landscape, there's action. But we experience all of that in life from our day to day. And understanding the camera, that just means that you understand the exposure triangle.
Hmm.
So a landscape photographer can also be a portrait photographer, can also be a street photographer. And most oftentimes, photographers are all of the above anyway.
Yeah.
They might work just doing portraits or just doing weddings, but I guarantee you they have landscape photography in their portfolio. I guarantee you that you've taken a picture of a still life of your favorite hat or whatever, or the hand of your partner as they're asleep or something like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't really like to say that I gravitate towards one thing, because if it's something that's interesting to me or I catch a feeling from it or just want to experiment with it, I'm going to try to capture it.
Nice. And I want to commend you on a couple shots that, man, I'm looking at them, and then I'm fascinated. Fascinating. No, I'm fascinated. This is what happened when a Frenchie tries to speak English. We mix up
Oh,
the end of the
well,
words.
you know what happens when an English person tries to speak French?
Well, we tried it at the beginning of the
Nothing.
pre-show, so maybe we switch to French for the remainder of the interview.
I might be able to understand you, but I don't think that I'll be able to respond
Ok, alors la
that
prochaine
well.
question.
Uh-huh.
Next question.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
that photo in New York with the red chair and the red sock. of the, I don't know if
Ah, yeah,
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 remember
yeah.
that one? I think
Hmm.
you said playing with edits or something like that. Life, more life.
Oh, yeah,
How, so a lot of photographers are trying to get better at seeing things. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite quotes in photography is one from Joel Meritz, who said, "You have a license to see," which
yeah,
is beautiful, beautifully crafted sentence. That's one thing, but being able to see those moments where there's like, hey, there's a red chair, there's red socks. Like, how do you get better at that? How do you get better at seeing things that makes you feel something and that you want to capture? Because I'm sure a lot of those photographers out there go on the street, they come back, they're like, I have zero good shots, I wasn't able to capture anything good. But how do you go from that to like, I came back with two decent shots, and this is the story I want to tell.
yeah. So I guess like another version of what Joel said is like a little quote that I had, and it's like, we have to stop trying to take pictures of what we've seen and start taking pictures of what we see.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because a lot of times, again, there's photography's oversaturated. There's too many photographers. Blah blah blah. You know, a lot of times we do try to copy what we've seen. Joel took a picture of this, or Alan Schaller took a picture of this, or blah blah blah, and I'm going to try to do the same thing, and people get caught up in trying to do the same thing rather than taking a pictures of what they see and what moves them. So that image, I was walking through New York, and this guy was sitting there, and of course, being from Los Angeles, New York looks completely different.
Yeah.
But that's true of any place, right? Like if I showed up in New Mexico, it'd be completely different. So I was walking through New York, and you see people sitting at the chairs, and it's a portion of the town where the streets are kind of blocked off. It's just for walking traffic, and the chairs were bright red, and the guy was sitting there and his socks were bright red, and I was like, oh, look at that little color story going on. And it was beyond that, because the color of the pavement underneath them and the greens that were, it did something in a color theory type of sense. And I was like, all right, let me see if I can capture it. And that was a rangefinder shot. So I'm just looking through the glass. I don't know what the image is going to do. And it came out with a lot of richness. This was also when I was like pretty new with the M11. So I was like discovering how rich the images could be and how the colors and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, that kind of sings a little bit. And that's where that came from. And I guess, that excitement, um, that is what led me to sharing it. It's like, yeah, look, check this out. This was, I don't know how powerful that shot is to me personally. I liked it. I typically don't post my favorite pictures on Instagram, but it resonates with people, and that's the power of what we do. So I think it's more about, you find yourself in doing these repetitions. Like by doing the laps, you definitely get faster and faster, but you really find what it is you're trying to see and what you're looking for, what you tend to see. And I think if you look at people's Instagrams, you see where their focus is, and not just their focus on subject matter, but their focus in style and in presentation. So
Yeah.
just go for it.
And this is the beauty of it. You never know what type of image or story will resonate with somebody else in the world. 8 billion people on this planet. I'm sure somebody somewhere is like me with this photo. I'm like, this resonated with me, and
Yeah,
it's a mixture of things. I mean, the way you carefully put that green chair just at the
yeah,
bottom, just a tad. I mean, this was thoughtful, and for me, again, this is something that you said it sings. For me, it's in harmony. Like this is
mhm.
harmony for me.
That's
Maybe I
dope.
have weird taste, but that is
No,
harmony for
no,
me.
that's dope. That's dope, man.
Yeah. So Greg, we're approaching the end of the show, and I want to know two things. The first one is, how did you feel the first time you saw your work printed? Big ass print on the wall. Like, what was the feeling when you first saw that?
I think, I mean, when you when I first saw my prints, I was, obviously proud. Um, but it gives it a different life, because we keep looking at these things on our screens, on our computers, on the back of the viewfinder, or the back of the camera, or on our phone or iPad. And again, like that's not where they're meant to live. Like I'm very guilty of going through them and just having hard drives full of, we all do. But when you print it, and this is all from Frank, when you print it, you give life. You're completing the equation of being a photographer. You're making the photograph, and seeing it in a tangible place on a large scale, it's almost like, awe-inspiring. There's images that you might think are incredible, and I guarantee you when you see it printed out and bigger, you're gonna be like, damn. Like there's a shot I have in the show that I had never seen outside of my edits, and I printed it. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be a good one for the show. When I was sequencing, and I printed it out and I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, this picture is like way better than I thought it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're going into an age where what we do with our hands, what we create, is going to have so much more value because it's going to be real. And seeing these things in the real world, sharing what you create, what you do, is going to have so much more weight, not just for monetary gain. I'm going to sell prints and all this, but for, on the spiritual side of things, on your own personal awareness of what it is you're capable of. I think that, and what we're capable of, like what we can share. If I can put something in your hand and say, this is from me to you, a picture, a piece of pizza that I made, whatever it is, we're gonna want to get back to that, and I think we already do. We just don't know really how to say it out loud. And so, do as much as you can to create these tangible things, because it feels good every time. I don't think there's been a time that it hasn't.
Wow, this is powerful stuff to end the conversation. But before we put a final dot to our conversation today, so Greg Hatton, what is up for you in the next few weeks and months? And you did mention you have an exhibition right now, like a gallery. So can you remind our listeners on when, where, and what's next?
Yeah. So I have an exhibition that's at the Leica Gallery, Los Angeles. It's in Los Angeles in the Beverly Hills area. It's going to be up until July 15th. The show is called Things You See. On June 23rd, we're going to be having a panel discussion with myself and the other artists that are in this group show. There's also a show that I produced at the Icon in Los Angeles. That's up until August. That show is called At Sea Level. It's the photographic work of Frank Jackson. I mentioned him before as my mentor. I produced that show to get his name out there and to show some of the master class that he's been doing for years. Also working on some documentary stuff with him, with some friends from Morocco. Excuse me, and building a show to go into bigger galleries with an amazing designer and scenographer. So you're going to see a lot more stuff from me in the real world. There'll be advertisements for it on Instagram. My handle on Instagram is Renaissance Man. I also have a handle and website and YouTube channel under my art name, or another name. It's Impaci, Impaci. You can look those up and see some other things as well. But yeah, you're going to see a lot more stuff in the tangible world. I'm going to try to make more appearances in places and really like connect with the photographic community wherever I go, and just share art, share the mission, and really just participate and contribute to this thing that we all love.
Well, Greg, you are always welcome on that show. I think you are one of the most generous artists out there who likes to talk about photography, talk about the art, the passion. It clearly shows that you are in it for the right reasons, and we need more, people like you, again, especially in a world where a lot of uncertainties around art and where it's going and so on and so forth. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation this morning, especially for you in LA. It's a bit earlier, and for me in Montreal, because again, if we can inspire one person to pick up a camera, or for that matter, a video camera, or I don't know, pencil, whatever, but to express themselves through art, I think it's the biggest gift you can give yourself, is being able to express yourself through something else than just a regular stuff that you see day in and day out at work and so on and so forth. So if
Yeah,
we were
no,
able to
it's
do that, job accomplished.
no. I mean, to be honest with you, bro, like that's what it is. And the funny thing is that art has always changed the world. Art has always been the thing that motivated, people to think a little bit differently. And how crazy would it be if photography changed the world again?
Well, that's what we will task our listeners to do. Go out and change the world. That's it. I think it's a nice way to end the show. But Greg Hatton, you've been, again, so generous with us today. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope that we see each other either in LA, in Montreal, or wherever in the world we end up connecting. And for you guys who are listening to the show, if you enjoyed the conversation, please make sure to go on your podcast app and give it a 5-star review. Or if you know a photographer friend, an artist, or just somebody who would benefit from listening to this show, make sure to share it through all the platforms. We're on all the listening and podcasting platform. I've been Fred Ranger. Today my guest was Greg Hatton, and I wish you a very pleasant remainder of your day. Cheers.